Glasses are also a bit of a filter, okay? The sunglasses. Some people will see the glasses and immediately make those the issue. They will not engage with the argument. They'll not engage with the ideas. They will not engage with the actual substance of the video. They'll say things like, "Oh, you're cringe," right? And honestly, this tells me something. Because if someone cannot get past a pair of sunglasses to hear the words being spoken, that person may not be the audience I'm trying to serve anyway. And they may very well show themselves the door, and this may very well have been my intent all along. Hello friends, welcome back to GM Philosophy. I'm the GM Philosopher, and this is the channel where we empower game masters to run better games. I'm a full-time pro game master, full-time pro TTRPG content creator. This is my job and my career, and I love it, and I'm so glad you are here. Now, today I want to talk about something a little different. I got a comment recently from someone who said that my new style of video with sunglasses is cringe, and in fact, here's the comment. Let's dive right into this. I'll keep the user's identity a secret so they don't get embarrassed. But they said, this new style of video with sunglasses is cringe. You're cutting off connection to an audience. I liked you at first, but you've gotten less relevant to the overall audience. You just have content for the smallest niche of D&D. Okay. Now, I got another comment actually, and they said, are you wearing sunglasses inside? And then someone else responded, of course. He will next tell us how bright the screen is and how he needs to wear them. So I want to do two things. I want to address why I wear sunglasses in my videos for the beautiful folks in my comments, right? I love all of you. Much love and peace. Much love and peace to all of you. Even the trolls. We even love the trolls here at GM Philosophy. And I'm going to turn this into a deeper lesson about D&D, actually, and even about life in general, okay? I think there's a much bigger lesson here for game masters that's actually very valuable. And this is actually true for content creators. This is even true for pro GMs. This is especially true for pro GMs. By the way, I recently released my latest book, the Pro GM's Guidebook, how I went from 0 pro games to 5 full pro games, turning what began as a dream into a side hustle, into a full-time income, 142 pages documenting the experience and the things I learned. If you would like to actually take seriously the path of being a pro GM, you should grab that. But, you know, this is the journey I've been on, guys, for the last, kind of for the last 10-ish months, but really very seriously the last 5 months. And then the last 3 months, I've been full-time self-employed. So we're still kind of new to the game, but there are lessons in here for people who are aspiring to want to do this. Okay. So let's dive into this, and we're going to take a little different approach. Why I wear sunglasses. So let's start with the obvious thing. Okay. If you watch much of my content, you realize I've adopted the sunglass aesthetic in pretty much all of my video appearances, right? But why do I do this? Okay. Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, I have experimented with and have realized this is a part of my brand. I think that's the simplest answer. I like the look. I think it works. I think it gives the videos a specific vibe, right? It feels a little darker, a little sharper, a little more visually distinct, right? It makes me stand out a bit. And frankly, I think I look good in the sunglasses, right? My opinion matters way more than anyone's opinions in the YouTube comments. My opinion of myself, just because I've developed self-respect for myself and I've developed self-love. And I love all of you, but with all due respect and with much kindness and gratitude in my heart for all the great things you do to me. Nobody's opinion on this channel will ever mean or matter as much as my own opinion of myself. And that's partly what we're going to talk about today, okay? We don't want to be delusional, but we must be stoic and impervious to having other people's words affect us emotionally. That's going to be a very important lesson for game masters in this episode. And it's going to be a very important lesson for TTRPG content creators too, okay? Well, but now I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So you are allowed to decide how you present yourself in this life, right? You're allowed to build a visual identity for yourself. You're allowed to wear, things you like. You're allowed to use the lighting you like, the background you want, to speak in the tone and to create the atmosphere that feels right for your work, okay? That does not mean everyone's going to like it. And that's totally fine, guys. I spend a lot of time talking into a camera every day. Some days, between recording videos, live streaming, prepping, running games, and doing all the emotional labor of being a pro GM and content creator, I may spend anywhere between 1 to 6 hours on camera, and sometimes more. If I turn my camera on for both of my Monday games, I will spend close to 10 hours on camera those days, right? If you do this every day, which I'm sure that a lot of these brilliant commenters probably don't do, but if you do this a lot every day, you'll start to realize being on camera is not incredibly emotionally neutral. It takes some emotional energy. At least it does for me, right? You're kind of performing a bit. You're thinking, you're teaching, you're reacting, you're organizing thoughts, trying to manage your face, right? Manage your voice, trying to be clear, trying to be useful, trying to be engaging, trying to give something valuable. And sometimes wearing sunglasses slightly reduces the emotional work of filming. Now, that is not the predominant reason why I wear them. Mostly it's for branding reasons. And guess what? When you're branding, you want to evoke a little emotion. Did you know that the formula to success involves about 5% outrage? You need about 5% of people to be outraged with you at all times. If it dips below this, you're starting to become boring and cookie cutter. We can't do this. You're not going to be successful if this is your approach. But it's also true that if at least 5% of people aren't outraged with you, you're probably not being authentic or honest either. And so I'm totally fine with 5% of people being completely out of their minds outraged with me. I'm very comfortable with this. I see this as success in the degree to which I wish to be authentic and emotionally evocative on camera, right? Because we have to entertain a little bit too when we're making content and running games, right? So that's really the short explanation. But now I want to turn this into a lesson that I think is really important. And it's a deeper lesson about this whole thing. Sunglasses, comments, the confidence, all of it. Glasses are also a bit of a filter, okay? The sunglasses. Some people will see the glasses and immediately make those the issue. They will not engage with the argument. They'll not engage with the ideas. They will not engage with the actual substance of the video. They'll say things like, oh, you're cringe, right? And honestly, this tells me something. Because if someone cannot get past a pair of sunglasses to hear the words being spoken, that person may not be the audience I'm trying to serve anyway. And they may very well show themselves the door, and this may very well have been my intent all along. That does not mean that every criticism is invalid, of course. This does not mean presentation never matters. Of course, presentation matters. But there's a difference between someone saying, hey, I think the sunglasses create some distance, and here's how it affects my viewing experience. Now, this I can get behind. This is an honest comment, and this is good. And because I practice Stoic philosophy, these comments, I don't take them personally. I treat them as data, and I'm grateful, right? I'm also grateful for the troll comments because they're engagement on my channel. So we can't leave the trolls out of the gratitude. But someone saying this is cringe or you're stupid, these are not the same thing, right? One of them is actual feedback, engagement on an intellectual level that took some effort. The other is just a little dart thrown from the cheap seats, right? This is what they call the peanut gallery. The poor folk back in the old days when they went to the circus, they could only afford the cheapest seats. And then they would throw peanuts across the way to interact with the performers. That's the only real interaction they get. And they called it, you're sitting in the peanut gallery, right? They'd throw the peanuts, right? So this is how I see people who say things like, you're cringe. Ooh. Right? I see these kinds of things. Do you think that do you think that my time is of so little value to me that I go on other people's channels and call them cringe? Do you think that I spend 1 second of my day doing that? Spreading negativity? Listen, I feel sorry for these people. I feel sorry for the people who their lives must be so unimportant that they will come on my channel, and even though I'm trying to say something important about the craft, about this hobby, they'll call my glasses cringe, and that's how they'll spend their time. This is probably the highlight of their day, guys, leaving comments on my channel like this. And that's a very sad thing. This makes me very sad. I almost tear up a little bit thinking about this, right? Now, GMs need to understand this. This actually does have lessons in it for D&D, okay? When you are a game master, you're making constant creative choices. You're choosing the tone, the pacing, the monsters, the rulings, right? You're going to do the NPC voices. You're going to choose when to be serious, when to be funny, when to challenge the party, when to give them room, when to say yes, when to say no. And because you're making choices, people will have opinions. Some players will love what you do all the time, or most of the time. Some players will not. Some players will have serious, big negative opinions about what you're doing. And just like with YouTube, some players will give thoughtful feedback, and then some will complain in ways that are vague, unhelpful, or emotionally immature, okay? Some people will say the game is too hard. Some will say you're running it too easy. Some will say there's too much role play. Some will say there's not enough, right? Some will say they want more freedom and then freeze when you give them the sandbox. Some will say they want consequences and then get upset when the consequences arrive dressed as paladins, right? With magic weapons. This is leadership. Okay, this is the screen. This is the chair. If you want to be a game master, especially a serious or dare I say pro game master, you need to develop a bit of a thick skin out here, guys. Not a hard heart, just a thick skin. And there's a big difference between those two things, okay? And here's how I describe it. We need to be kind, but formidable. We need to draw ironclad boundaries and then enforce those boundaries with kindness and respect, okay? This is what I think game masters need to become to be successful, okay? Kind means you care about your players. You listen. You take feedback seriously. You want people to feel welcome. You want them to have a good experience. You want your table to feel safe, fun, exciting, emotionally worthwhile, okay? You're not trying to dominate people. You're not trying to be cruel. You're not trying to win some weird little throne made of dice bones, right? We're not playing game of dice thrones out here. But formidable means you're not fragile. You have learned and have evolved beyond letting the negative feedback actually affect your emotions. When you get that negative feedback, when you get that criticism, friend, you're not caring on an emotional level. You are learning to do one thing that I think is very important for leadership. It's more caring not to care, because when those words come in, instead of letting them affect your feelings, then you reacting to them, which is chaos. What you're doing is you're taking those words and you are just extracting the useful data from them. And you're saying, thank you so much for your input. And then you make whatever changes you think are necessary and you discard the rest. This is wisdom. This is leadership. This is also emotional regulation and emotional discipline. Okay. This is crucial for good game masters. They must have this because they are community leaders. They're in a leadership position and other people are relying on them to emotionally regulate themselves. Okay. Being formidable means you do not crumble every time someone dislikes your decision, right? It doesn't mean you abandon your style because one person calls it cringe or says you're stupid. You do not let every comment, complaint, facial expression, or moment of awkward silence control your emotional state, right? You can listen without falling apart. You can care without becoming dependent on other people's approval. You can adapt without surrendering your unique and authentic identity. This is the balance. Be kind, but formidable. Soft enough to hear the truth and to welcome it. Strong enough not to be ruled by it or controlled by it, right? This is self-control, self-discipline. And we can't blame the people who cast the stones at us. They're just being honest and they're being emotional maybe too. But we are called to a higher standard being leaders. And it's important that we understand this. Now, criticism is not always a command to do things either, okay? One of the biggest lessons for game masters is this. Criticism doesn't always need to take the form of a you must take action thing. That's just not how it is. Just because someone criticizes you does not mean that you should change anything or that you have to change anything. Sometimes they'll be right, but sometimes they'll be wrong. And sometimes there'll be a little truth in what they said, which is usually the case, right? Sometimes they're describing their own personal preferences as if it were universal law. And they're allowed to have preferences, guys. Listen, I believe in zero censorship. I don't want to censor a single person in my comments. If they want to, there are people I wouldn't want to have access to my comments. People I very much don't respect, who I don't think I want to allow a voice in my community, but I don't want to censor words, right? So the vast majority of people who are allowed to be included in my community, which is my YouTube channel, my Discord. By the way, if you want to join our Discord, links in the description. If they want to criticize me, I'm open to hearing it and I'm not going to get upset about it. And it's important that I don't. This is my responsibility, right? It's not the person's fault who said the thing if I get upset. It's my fault for not emotionally regulating myself. This is called being radically self-responsible, being self-accountable. We have to be accountable to our own high standards first and foremost, right? Sometimes when people complain or cast stones like this, they're reacting to a real issue, but expressing it badly. Sometimes they're just having a bad day, man. And your content, your ruling, your NPC, your pacing, or your sunglasses just happen to rub them the wrong way, and they just took it out on you, right? So you have to sort that out in your data collection process, okay? A leader does not ignore criticism, but a leader does not obey every complaint like it is a holy prophecy carved into the dungeon wall, right? You consider it. You ask, is this useful? Is there a pattern here? Is this coming from someone I trust, right? Is this aligned with the kind of game, channel, or table or community I'm trying to build? Like, is this feedback about substance, or is it just someone reacting to style, or is it just someone reacting to, their own feelings, right? You've got to decide these things. You have to do a data analysis of these things. This is the wise thing to do, right? So you do that, but you don't let the comment decide for you, right? This is called wisdom. And it's called being strong in yourself, okay? And that brings us to my next point, which is do not let strangers hold the remote control to your nervous system. This is one of the most important points. You cannot let strangers hold the remote control to your feelings, your emotions, your reactions, right? Because if you allow them to do this, guess what? You're giving all of your power to these people, these complainers, these trolls, these whiners, or whatever. And I'm not trying to say everyone who gives any criticism is a whiner or a troll. That's not what I'm trying to say. We know there's a big difference between those two, but I'm just saying that that's a risk you take when you allow people's criticism to undermine your own emotional self-regulation, right? You cannot let every player mood, YouTube comment, Discord message, or offhand remark determine whether you feel confident today. That would be exhausting and it would be pure chaos. If you do that long enough, you will burn out. You will lose touch with who you are. You will lose your sense of self-identity, right? You don't want that. You should have a strong sense of self-identity and be confident in that, right? As GMs, we are already managing a lot of stuff. We're managing rules, tone, pacing, right? Spotlight control, player expectations, story, conflict, consequences, difficulty, prep, scheduling, table energy, right? We also allow every stray negative comment into our ecosystem because we care. And if we allow all of these negative comments to hijack our emotional state, we're going to become miserable and we're going to become less effective. Okay. Here's the truth, guys. People can dislike you and you can still be totally fine. Okay. People can criticize you and you can still be doing great work. In fact, you probably are doing great work if you actually care and you're trying to get better. People can misunderstand you and you can still keep building what you're building. Okay. Someone can call you cringe. Your life doesn't have to end because of this, guys. You don't have to let these comments get in your mind, right? But this is difficult because we live in a world that I believe has an epidemic of no self-love, no self-respect. Nobody's being strong out here. And I'm not trying to say that to all of you. I believe very much that we are growing up in a world where everyone is emotionally reactive to everyone else and it's a problem. And this is exactly why sometimes people will make little passive aggressive remarks or make jabs at you or leave a comment on your YouTube because it will reward them to get a rise out of you. And believe it or not, that's actually the highlight of their day because their life is so sad. And that actually makes me feel sad because it's like, damn it. How can there be humans out here who are so sad that this is what they do with their time, right? I have empathy. I care. I feel sorry for these people. And it's actually a serious issue. If you care about those people, I don't know them personally, so it's like less of an issue for me. But what if that was your brother or your sister, right? It would be grave cause for concern. What if that was your kid leaving comments like that? I would say action should be taken, not to punish them for speaking their mind, but to really have a serious conversation about what are you making your life worth through this behavior? We must cultivate high levels of self-respect. We must cultivate high levels of self-value and excellence. We must hold ourselves to a certain standard because if we don't, guys, the world will not. The world will let you be whatever you want to be, but then the bad news is that consequences will follow, right? Now, as game masters who want to succeed at this craft, we must hold ourselves to a higher standard than this, right? And I sure as hell hope there are no game masters out there who claim to be a leader running a game who are on YouTube making negative comments like this. I hope not, because that would be very telling of what that GM's level of self-respect and self-worth actually is and how they value their time. Do you see what I'm saying? We need to think about this because we need to cultivate these things. We need to cultivate self-value, self-respect for ourselves so that we can be better leaders. Being a leader is a vital cornerstone of this hobby from the game master perspective, right? Now, the right people will get what you're trying to do, okay? Your style will attract some people and repel others. That's not always a problem. Sometimes that's the point, right? If you're trying to be for everyone, you'll become bland and you probably won't be successful. You will sand off every edge. You'll flatten your voice. You'll stop making interesting choices because someone somewhere might not like them. But strong brands have shape. Strong game masters have style. Strong campaigns have tone. Strong creative work has edges to it, guys. Some people love my darker, more intense, sunglass wearing, hard GM philosophy vibe. That is okay. Likewise, some players will love your gritty realism campaign and the rulings you make and the hardcore mechanics you play in your games. Some will want heroic power fantasy. Some will love tactical combat. Some will want that cozy tavern roleplay, okay? Some want high drama, right? But you do not need to be everyone's game master either. You need to know what you do. Lean into your talents. Lean into your passions. Do it well. This is creative, guys. Attract the people who actually want what you want. That applies to YouTube. That applies to pro GMing. That applies to tables. That applies to life, okay? It's very important. Now, when you find the right people, you're going to be able to actually create emotional buy-in with them, which is very important. In fact, I wrote a book. You can grab it. The Advanced Art of TTRPG Game Mastery for about the price of a cup of coffee. 50-page ebook about how to actually build emotional resilience, emotional resonance, emotional buy-in from your players. Create the kind of games that'll have players coming back wanting to play with you again and again. But guess what? You can grab that book, links in the description. You can read it. However, you're going to learn very quickly, even in that book, but also in this video, that if you are not being honest and authentic with yourself, there can be no trust, okay? It's also important to stay humble out here. Thick skin can become arrogance if you're not careful, right? That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm not saying ignore everyone. You're always right. Critics are just haters. Screw them, right? That would be actually childish and just as much a negative emotional reaction as any others, right? Sometimes the critics are correct, guys. Sometimes your players telling you something they don't like is important and it would be helpful to listen. Right? Sometimes your pacing might be off. Sometimes your encounters might be too easy, especially if you hear it from a high percentage of your players, right? Sometimes communication can be unclear. Sometimes your tone may not be landing right, right? Sometimes your branding choices might be costing you valuable connections. Listen, I often say 5%, 5% of my viewership is just utterly up in arms over something I'm doing. I'm probably doing something right. But if that number was 10% or 15%, I probably need to take a serious look at the outrage I'm creating and ask, is this actually good for the brand? I might be going too far. And that's an honest data assessment that we need to make, right? A mature GM will be willing to ask, is there any truth here, right? And that's the key. Don't accept every insult. Don't let it get to your feelings, right? But do search for the truth rationally, with a brain for reasonability. If someone says the style just cuts off connection with the audience, I can ask myself, and I should ask myself, is that true? Is it true to such an extent that I should change? But here's what I actually think. I actually think that the brand evokes enough passion, apparently, that it does way more good than harm. Thus, it's a cost-benefit analysis that I do. And this is what I've come up with, right? Feel free to let me know. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Does the trade-off still serve my brand? Does it help me show up consistently? Does it make the content more visually distinct? Does it match the audience I'm actually trying to build? Those are real questions, guys. But I do not need to spiral just because one person said cringe, right? There's a difference between humility and emotional surrender, okay? And another thing is that it's not your job as the game master to be liked by everyone, okay? You're not supposed to be liked by everyone. Your job is to lead the table well. This means being fair, clear, creative, prepped, responsive, emotionally grounded, willing to say yes, willing to say no, willing to make hard calls and stand by them. If your deepest need is for everyone to approve of you, game mastering is going to hurt your feelings and you're not going to have a good time. Leadership always creates friction. At some point, someone will dislike a ruling. Someone will dislike a consequence. They'll dislike your tone. They're not going to like your pacing. They're not going to like your house rules. They're not going to like the way you handled Spotlight. And you should care, but you should not let it ping your emotions or control you. That's the line, okay? So at the end of the day, the sunglasses are not the point. They're not the point. Why do I wear sunglasses when I talk about D&D? Because I like them. Because they're part of my brand. Because they help me create some visual identity that I think is fun and I enjoy. Because sometimes they lower the emotional cost of filming for hours a day. Sometimes. That's a more minor detail, but it is true. That's actually how it started. And then I was like, wait a minute. I'm looking pretty good in these sunglasses. I kind of like this. And then that's what it turned into. People who cannot get past them probably were not here for the substance of my words anyway. Sunglasses aren't really the point. The point is that if you're going to create anything, lead anything, run anything, build anything, or GM anything, people are going to have opinions about you. Your job is not to become immune to feedback. Your job is to become strong enough to receive feedback without letting it ping your emotions and being owned by it. Okay. And that's the lesson. So boom, there you have it. Now you know why I wear sunglasses. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy. Empowering Game Masters to run better games is the goal. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, friends, and I will see you on the next one.